This is Bean to Barstool, a podcast that looks at the intersections of craft chocolate, craft beer, and other artisan drinks. My name is David Nilsson. I'm a professional drinks writer, an advanced cicerone, the author of Pairing Beer and Chocolate, and the creator and host of this show. The music for this episode is by my dear friend, indie folk musician Anna P.S. You can find out more about Anna's music in the show notes or on annapsmusic.com. You can find links and information about our guests in the show notes as well. I hope you enjoy this episode of Bean to Barstool.
I would say 90% of what I buy is stuff that just I want to drink. And then which again, like as a business model, like maybe isn't the best, but so far it's worked out. Cause I figure like, if I enjoy it, probably somebody else might. And then the other 10% is like, okay, I know I can sell this. Like this is a fan favorite. I know that this is something that I can sell and I can get rid of. And really the rest of it is like, man, like what sounds interesting to me?
That's Michael Beans of Namesake Coffee in Dayton, Ohio, where I get pretty much all of my coffee beans for making coffee here at home. Michael and his wife Jessica own Namesake. Their last name really is Beans. That's how they came up with the name for the company, Namesake. I met Michael and Jessica many years ago now at Learn, Love, Eat, which was an all-day tasting seminar put on by our mutual friend London Coe of Peace on Fifth. London has been on Bean to Barstool a couple times. She's one of my favorite people in craft chocolate. And Learn, Love, Eat brought together experts, like I said, in all these different food and beverage spaces, bourbon, beer, coffee, chocolate, to give talks and tastings and approach tasting in a more thoughtful way. Michael and Jessica were kind enough to sit in on a talk that I gave. Parts of that talk actually ended up becoming part of the very first episode of Bean to Barstool. And I sat in on a cupping that Michael and Jessica led of their coffee that was also just kind of an educational talk on how to taste coffee and how to do a proper cupping. Actually got to walk through that with my friend, chocolate writer Megan Giller, which was a lot of fun. Namesake is my favorite coffee roaster locally. I actually have a subscription to their coffee, so they just send me whole beans every couple of weeks, and I really love what they're doing. One of their mottos is drink intentionally, which could easily be adapted to a motto for Bean to Barstool: drink intentionally, taste intentionally. At the beginning of our conversation, I asked Michael, why coffee? What was the road that led him to this?
I would say I started drinking coffee, probably sometime in like early high school, with like the Starbucks boom and just, like it was like the really cool third space to be in. And, it was new, like, there was nothing like it at the time. And so yeah, I just started drinking really sugary drinks, along with coffee. And so that was kind of my start. And then it wasn't until college that I had my first cup of what I considered to be like, oh, that's not super bitter and not super burnt and like tastes totally different than all the other black coffee I had had at the time. And so that kind of showed me like, oh, wow, like this is more than just a really bitter, burnt drink that you have to put a ton of milk and sugar in to be palatable. And whoever likes this without that is just kind of like, weird, or is just like super used to really burnt things. So yeah, right after college, had a couple of jobs in between, those first couple of years. And I just kind of started to dip my toe into going to really great coffee shops, but not making good coffee at home. It just, wasn't a priority and not something that I put a lot of time and effort into, but I liked to go to coffee shops mostly for the space. Trying different coffees and things was like was like fun and adventurous, but I wouldn't say it was something that I ever, envisioned a career or was super passionate about. And it wasn't until I think in 2014, my wife and I, we moved here to Dayton, and that was when I really started to get more into making coffee at home, really by way of coffee farming. So I have a horticulture degree, and I had just graduated, the spring before we moved here. And my background is in kind of, like sports fields, golf courses, that type of thing. But I really did love just horticulture in general, and loved trees, farming, that kind of thing, and grew up in an area that had those types of things. And so, yeah, I was just super fascinated with how things grow, and that kind of led into the coffee farming stuff, and just honestly out of pure interest did kind of like a deep dive into that, which obviously led to then, okay, so wow, coffee is this huge, vast, super diverse thing, that farming is super important, and then roasting, obviously, like that leads into roasting, and then the brewing, and it just like it's such a deep rabbit hole if you start to go down. For somebody like me that's just super interested in those types of things, it was a years long rabbit hole that I just dove headlong into, and that's a short way of saying how we got to here today. So
Sure. Yeah. Well, one thing I think is true for most people who are involved in some kind of artisan food or drink, I know this is true for me. I'm curious to hear if it's true for you, is that whatever the specific thing you got into, whether it was coffee for you or wine or whatever it is, it could have been something else. One of these
oh,
things happened to
totally.
hook you, but it could have been any of these others. What is it today that you feel like continues to fuel your curiosity and passion specifically for coffee?
Yeah, I actually love that you say that, because I think growing up and then even going into college, I was never a person who thought deeply about flavor and food, and that type of, like, I always loved food. Like, my mom is Puerto Rican, and cooked Latin American dishes, Puerto Rican dishes all the time. My dad has zero appreciation for food even today, so like I didn't get any of that from him. But yeah, my mom and her whole side of the family has always been uh really into food. And so I got some of that, but I wouldn't say personally I was ever really focused or interested in that, besides the fact that I really did love different types of food. And now, what fuels that, I would say, man, I still feel like, which is kind of crazy, but I still do feel like tasting a new coffee that I haven't had, like there's still that spark there. Like I'm every time I go to a new cafe or a coffee shop, whenever Jess and I travel to a new place, we're always checking out, different local places. And I never get one thing. Like I always order a drip, a cortado, a shot of espresso. Like I always just want to like try different things, because I feel like whether it's coffee, whether it's restaurants, food, I've honestly noticed just really in the last couple of years, it's really hit me, and I've noticed how much I love just trying different flavors, even things that I wouldn't necessarily say I love or I'd want to have again. Just the experience of tasting different things is just so much more interesting to me, now that I've just been exposed to so much more, I think.
It's fun that you say that about going into other coffee shops and trying multiple things. What is it that you get that tells you this place knows what they're doing? I mean, what is it that you try when you go to a place?
We'll be right back.
Getting a Cicerone certification can be a game changer for your beer career, but how are you supposed to find the time to prep, and how do you know what and how much to study? When I was preparing for my Cicerone certification, I used the Beer Scholars study guides. The Beer Scholar currently offers efficient online courses for levels 1 and 2 of the Cicerone program that cover everything you need to know and contain tips and tricks for how to pass the exams, and include live weekly Zooms to taste and discuss classic beer styles together. They even have a new coaching program for level 3, Advanced Cicerone, that I really wish had been around when I was preparing for that exam. The majority of certified Cicerones in the world today have used Beer Scholar to help achieve their goals. If you're ready to level up your beer career, visit thebeerscholar.com to check out their online courses. I'll link to that in the show notes. Now, back to our episode.
So I try very hard to reserve judgment on a place, just walking in the door. And I say that because I'm very anti kind of like the snobby cafe.
Sure.
Like one of our taglines for our business is like coffee is to be enjoyed and coffee is for everyone. Like I love it when somebody who has never had a cup of black coffee is willing to try it and it's just like blowing their mind, like, oh wow, this actually is like good. And so I try to be like the anti-snob, and at the same time, like if I'm in a room full of like coffee snobs that just want to do like a deep nerdy dive into coffee, like I'm all about that as well. Like I love
Mm-hmm.
that. And so when I go into a place like to say, oh, like what tells me a place knows what they're doing, number one is customer service. Like if people are nice and kind and like willing to chat you up, and if you ask about something on the menu and they don't like roll their eyes at you and are annoyed that you're asking questions, like that's number one. And then number two, you know, I know that like as a barista, your job is first and foremost to like make a good drink. And so if you don't necessarily know all the information or the background about a coffee, like that's fine. Like I don't have that high of an expectation. But to me, it's just having good quality things. Like if you're gonna serve a drip, like yeah, like I love sometimes like an outlandish coffee, but like not everyone's going to love that. So like my expectation for that is not as high. It's like if you want a pour over, if you want something like single serve, then maybe there's that place for that. And I do think some cafes will reserve that place for that. But no, like to me, just like good solid coffee, like something that's brewed at like a solid coffee to water ratio that doesn't taste old and stale from a pot that's been sitting on the bar for like 4 hours. Like to me, like those are just kind of like baseline expectations. And then obviously with espresso, any sort of espresso drink, the milk steaming, like whether the milk was steamed correctly, if it's like way too hot and you're burning your mouth, or it's super super thin, with no texture. I mean, like, and again, like I'm really easy to please. Like I try to be, again, like super non-judgmental. Like if it's palatable, like I'm gonna drink it and I'll probably enjoy it to a certain degree, because at, at the end of the day, like people are just trying to make a living. But yeah, like to go to a place that just does things like so well and is just so inviting and everything is fantastic, like you really appreciate those places. And then when you go somewhere where you're like, oh wow, like the staff was really nice, but like just the product was subpar, it's like, hey, you know what, like you're not always going to get the best of the best of the best, but like everyone's trying to do their best. So
Yeah. Well, beyond just tasting coffee, your day as a roaster is filled with sensory experiences, and you're using
right.
all of those to evaluate what you're doing, color and aroma and all these different things. Take us behind the scenes to some of those sensory experiences and cues that you're getting throughout your day when you're roasting.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say as a and again, there's a lot of opinions, a lot of different styles, a lot of ideas around how to roast coffee. And again, that is a deep rabbit hole where you will find very opinionated people. So I'm not, I want to preface this by saying, like, my way is not the way or the right way. It's the way that I do it and the way that I learned, the way that I learned from other people. A lot of it was self-taught, YouTube University, or just going to conferences and listening. And so the way that I do things is just the way that I do it. And I'm very data centric in terms of for roasting. The sensory experience, I would say, is something super valuable that I would say, if you're going into roasting, start with sensory roasting, where you're checking color, you're smelling, you're developing that sense, to just for like an educational basis. But to me, to create a sense of repeatability and quality and consistency, to me you to me I have to be data driven. So I track all of our roasts with computer software. And to me, like when I throw a brand new coffee in the roaster, that it's a beta test. You don't necessarily know exactly how it's gonna go. But I will say, like, at this point too, I know my roaster. I know, I've had thousands and thousands of hours working with this specific roaster. And so even if it doesn't turn out to be exactly what I would want it to be, like, it's typically in a very like narrow range where, like, yeah, it's going to be good. But then from there, I'm like, okay, so I want to change the gas setting here, change the airflow here to make sure that I'm getting the exact result that I want. And at that point, it's about repeatability. So I know, okay, so for our Guatemalan, like, these are the times, these are the numbers, this is what I'm looking for. Our Ethiopian's going to be totally different, at least currently. Kenyan's going to be totally different. Brazil's going to be similar. Our espresso blend is going to be fairly similar. And so to me, it's a mix of sensory experience. But at this point, I would say, other than looking for color towards the end of the roast, that's definitely something that I will judge, especially if I haven't hit that roast time exactly in the space that I want. At that point, you're making a little bit of a judgment call. But even that, usually, as long as the roaster has been warmed up properly and all that, like, we can hit that pretty good. So, and that's just me personally. The sensory experience comes more in tasting than I would say in roasting at this point.
Well, when you're developing a new roast profile, or you got new beans in and this is your first time roasting them, what is it that you're looking for to evaluate to say, yeah, we're where we want to be for this particular bean, since that ideal taste profile is kind of an unknown at that point until it's done.
Right. Yep. Totally. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, there's going to be a couple of roasts, some tasting, figuring out what we want, and I will say this too. It's all subjective. Every roaster has different styles. If I were to put a style onto Namesake Coffee, I would say we are a medium roaster or a medium light roaster, depending on who you might ask. My goal with the vast majority, if not all of our coffees, is to roast to a point where you maximize the level of sweetness. So when you're roasting, there's all sorts of compounds, but there's sugars in those seeds, in the beans. And getting to a medium roast is essentially an attempt at kind of maximizing, caramelizing the maximum amount of sugar in that bean without burning it away, and still retaining that. And so, with a lot of lighter roasts, you can, a very skilled person can roast light coffee very well, but you border on a lot more acidity, sometimes grassy vegetal flavors that wouldn't necessarily be good. You end up having to rest coffee a lot longer, or you should rest your coffee a lot longer post roast to kind of get some of that off the palate, which is fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, I would say our style is definitely more in the sweetness range, and I think that's like our baseline customers have, like, and people that come to us like that. And it's also the demographic, like, who are you selling to, what do they like, and so that plays a role into it. And at the same time, like, obviously I get questions like, hey, can we get this, like, Italian or French roasted? And I'm like, No, like that's just not something that we do. Not to say that that's wrong, but that's not our goal. That's not what we do. And I've told a couple of people this very non-judgmentally, like, hey, you're wasting your money if you want to buy like an Ethiopian coffee from me and have me French roast it. Like, just go buy some French roast, like, from the grocery store from somewhere else, and it will be just as good, so, and much cheaper. Yeah, I would say trying to develop a certain target for that. It's like maximum sweetness and kind of, hitting that mark.
How do you go about your sourcing for different origins?
Yeah, so with the size that we are as a company, as a roasting company, we are not quite at the level where we'd go like direct to farm, just because it's not advantageous, mostly for the farmer, because we can't buy enough to make it worth it for them.
Mhm.
And so we worked with third party importers, and we work with a couple of importers that we love their mission. We love the way that they work. Our customer service and personal experience with them has been just great. And the importers that we work with, focus on they focus on personal relationships as much as they possibly can. Obviously, like, at the end of the day, like, to run a successful business, money is a part of it. And so obviously you're going to have bulk buys. You're going to buy from co-ops, which, if I'm using words that people don't know, a co-op is essentially a collection of farmers in a certain region that bring all of their coffee to a processing facility, and it all gets kind of mixed together and then sold off as like, hey, this is a coffee from this region of this country. And sometimes like that can be like, people kind of like turn their nose up at that, but I'm like, no, like, you've got, like, farming is such a difficult and then also like very diverse profession, especially outside of the US. And so if you think of like just geographically where some of these farms are, to say like, oh yeah, like, you as this farmer with this, this amount of coffee should be selling direct, and like you should like have ultimate traceability, like, it's just not feasible in a lot of parts of the world. And so what I love about the people that we work with, though, is that they're very transparent. Number one, so I know where everything is coming from, even if it's from just a certain region instead of down to the farmer level. And they care deeply about not just traceability, but transparency within, the context of like coffee farming. And again, like, that's a whole nother rabbit hole that we
Sure.
could dive into, and that's a whole nother podcast. All that to say, they care deeply about traceability, transparency, and just the overall success of not just the roasters and not just of, the cafes in America, but the success of the farmers who are producing that coffee.
What makes you decide to take on a new origin when one of your third party places has something available?
Man, my own curiosity and excitement. And again, it's a balance. I would say 90% of what I buy is stuff that just I want to drink. And then which again, like, as a business model, like, maybe isn't the best, but so far it's worked out, because I figure like, if I enjoy it, probably somebody else might. And then the other 10% is like, okay, I know I can sell this. Like, this is a fan favorite. I know that this is something that I can sell and I can get rid of. And really the rest of it is like, man, like, what sounds interesting to me. And obviously, like, I have my favorites, and so I have a spreadsheet of like all the different origins, and like, okay, how many copies from this place have we bought, and like, I try to hold myself accountable to not just like repeat like all these, like we do have repeat coffees, but that's mostly like, like, for example, our Ethiopian Shikiso. That is a coffee that I have bought for, gosh, like the last like 6 or 7 years, and it's a coffee that we'll continue to buy, mostly because it comes from a, a single farm that I just love what they do, and I love the coffee as well. So like, we just keep buying that. Like, we have other Ethiopians that we'll buy too, but that's just one that like we love to buy. But yeah, what goes into buying a new coffee? It's literally just like my own curiosity and like, oh man, like, I want to try that. And so I'm going to buy it, and hopefully, hopefully other people like it too.
Sure. So when you get in a new origin and you don't know if you're going to do this again, how much is a single batch of that coffee that you're making? How much is available then?
Right. So typically, if it is something that is a bit of a wild card, I'll buy like a bag, which is about 150 pounds. So it's a commitment, but it's not something that's going to break the bank. And so yeah. And I'll say this: up until this point, I've never bought a single coffee that I couldn't sell. That was just
Sure.
awful. There's always different tastes for people. They're like, oh yeah, like I absolutely love this. Like I have friends who are like, oh yeah, like I only want naturally processed, super fruity coffees, and then I have other friends who are like, I don't want a single one of those. Like, and then obviously there's the people in the middle. They're like, oh yeah, like that's kind of interesting, but I would not want to start my day every day with that. And so like, there's always people who like different things, and yeah, I've never had a coffee that I couldn't sell.
We'll be right back.
Hey everyone. You may have noticed things in the world aren't awesome right now, and social media kind of reflects that. I built a lot of the following for Bean to Barstool and just for my own writing career on Instagram, but I've been getting significantly lower returns in terms of engagement on Instagram, and well, some of their recent changes don't have me thrilled for the future. So, here are some ways to keep up with Bean to Barstool if Instagram and other social media platforms don't prove to be long-term viable solutions. If you do nothing else, sign up for the Bean to Barstool newsletter. You can do that by going to beantobarstool.com/newsletter-signup. That link is in the show notes. That is a weekly email newsletter that covers all the same things we cover here on the podcast. Speaking of, subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Wherever you listen to Bean to Barstool, go there and subscribe to make sure you get notifications of new episodes. If you're a proud millennial like me and you still use an RSS feeder, you can also subscribe to our blog posts, which come out at least weekly. Also, if you are still on social media but don't love Meta right now, you can check me out over on Blue Sky. I'm on there under my personal account at David Nilsson Beer, but I do post all the Bean to Barstool content over there as well. Finally, if you want to get in touch with me directly, you can email beantobarstool@gmail.com. I am not leaving Instagram anytime soon, but these are great ways to make sure you can keep up with what I have going on. Stay safe and take care of each other. Do you have your own coffee rituals, for lack of a better word? I mean, things that you do, whether daily or as often as possible, to take yourself back to just being a taster and a chocolate lover and not just a professional?
Oh, okay, that's a great question. When you said, "Do you have your own rituals?" I absolutely have my own rituals.
It can be
Most,
both. It can be as a professional too, I guess. But
yeah, yeah. It's interesting. I like to make. I don't know. Maybe it's about the same, but sometimes I think I like to make coffee more than I like to drink it. Uh, and that's not to say that I don't like to drink it. I do. But my like one of my favorite things is having 10, 15 people over and like making lots of coffee. And so, man, I definitely start my day with drip coffee every day, and I have a certain brewer that I just love to make it in that is kind of like the perfect mix of impossible to mess up, but also like feels like you're making something craft at the same time. Like it's not automated. It's a very manual process, but you can kind of turn your brain off and you don't have to really pay attention, which is nice first thing in the morning.
what is that?
So yeah, so it's actually it can be a pour over in the same vein as like a V60, but it's actually got a little valve in the bottom of it that you can close completely. So it can also be an immersion brewer, and that's typically how I use it. So it's actually like a glass, like a little glass cone with a valve in the bottom. It's got a like a metal mesh filter, and then you can also put like a Kalita paper filter over top of that. So you can get a really, really clean cup of coffee using it that way. And that's typically how I make it. Put your coffee in there, put your water in there, immersion brew it for 4 minutes, and then just open the valve and let it, and let it fall out. So that's typically how I use it. Every now and then, if I'm really, really awake, you can also use it as a V60 brewer where you I wouldn't open the valve completely because that's a really, really high flow rate, but you can actually control the flow rate with that valve, which is fantastic. Which obviously with V60 flow rate is, matters. And so it's nice to be able to control that. But yeah, I would say rituals professionally, to make sure that I'm, keeping my palate up to date or appreciative or like all those things. I definitely drink bad coffee every now and then on purpose, to kind of reset the scales. And then for sure, obviously, like not just when we're bringing in new coffees, but you know, obviously that Ethiopian that we've had for forever, and I've done hundreds of roasts of it. Like obviously I wouldn't say I'm cupping every single batch. I do cut batches that I'm like, oh, I wasn't like totally paying attention there. And like, there's a little bit of quality control there. But even with, rolling and rolling through batches of coffee that we've made, I taste our coffee to make sure that I'm not just blindly selling stuff that I haven't tasted in a long time. And to like say for our espresso blend, we keep the origins the same, and we try very, very hard to keep the farms the same. That's not always possible, especially with like seasonality and things like that. But anytime we introduce not a new coffee, but a coffee that's newly harvested, and we're introducing that into that blend, we roast it by itself so that I have a good idea of like what it tastes like, especially in comparison to what we had before. And then obviously once it's blended, obviously we're tasting it as well to make sure that our percentages, ratios, and it's tasting the way that we want it. So yeah, personally have a lot of rituals, and then professionally it's more like, okay, quality control, and then making sure that I'm appreciative of what good coffee tastes like.
Sure. Well, coffee is kind of unique among artisan food and beverage in that the consumer has to finish the process. With
Right.
chocolate
Yes.
or alcoholic drinks, it can be presented in its completed form. And sure, it could be stored wrong or held on to too long, but for the most part, it can be given in the exact form that the maker wants the consumer to have it. You are trusting on faith that a consumer
Mm.
is not going to ruin your coffee. So tell me a little bit about kind of your mindset around that of having to release this thing that you've labored over and hoping that it's going to be handled with the care that you want it to be.
Man, I would say, I don't know, I might have a fairly interesting response to this. Maybe not interesting, maybe just different. Again, number one, I try to be as non-judgmental as possible. Maybe I'm too trusting. I don't spend much time thinking about that, to be honest, which I'm glad, I'm glad that you asked that. But I think two things. I think with coffee culture, and just because maybe since the the dawn of coffee's existence, it's kind of been like, oh yeah, like making it is part of the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like unless you go to a cafe and somebody's making it for you, if you have coffee lying around your house, like you just have this understanding, like, oh yeah, like I need to make this. And even with automatic brewers, with all sorts of equipment, I think there's this baseline understanding from people that like, oh, you can't just throw coffee into the machine, have water run through it and expect it to be good every single time. Like there's got to, like, you're kind of cooking, sort of like at that point you're
Mm-hmm.
making something. And so if it's bad, like I think I have obviously met people who are like, oh yeah, like I hate this coffee because it's not good, but then I bought this coffee and I made it and it was great. And I'm like, well, that could have just been your brewer, that could have just been you, like all those things. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
definitely those people, but I think the vast majority of people, especially I think people buying my coffee, my product as a craft product, there's an understanding of like, hey, like I'm a big part of this. Like I I have a lot of control and a lot of responsibility here. And so obviously I get a lot of questions from people. Oh, how do I make this the best? How would you recommend I make this? I don't I don't know. I don't think. I don't remember if I've ever had a single person email me, message me on Instagram, whoever said, "Hey, this coffee is crap," and I made it exactly perfect and it was terrible. Like I've never like it's always like, "Hey, so like how would you recommend making this? Hey, if
Sure.
I'm making it this way, how would you recommend me be, have the highest chance of success?" And maybe that's just the fact that I've always had nice people write me. I don't know. But but yeah, I wouldn't say I stress about that. I love answering questions. I love it when people write me and ask me, "Hey, how do I brew this the best?" I love educating people on how to make things the best possible way. But yeah, I guess I just I feel like there's this overall understanding of like, hey, man, if you're buying a craft product, and I do this too, like whatever it is. Sorry, I don't want to like go off the rails a little bit here, but like I love to bake as well. And I'm on this kick of buying this artisan flour from this mill in Arizona. It's fantastic, amazing. If I don't make it well, if I don't let it rise for the certain, for the right amount of time, it's not the flour's fault, it's
Right,
me.
right, yeah.
I guess I kind of come at it from that, like, oh yeah, like doesn't everybody think that, like that they have some sort of, responsibility? And obviously not everybody does, and that's fine. But I don't lose sleep at night over
Sure.
that.
Well, let's talk about making a good cup of coffee. For folks at home who, don't have professional equipment, what are the steps that we can take, whether that's, affordable equipment or just easy to follow guidelines to make the best cup of coffee consistently?
Yeah, absolutely. And first I want to say you definitely do not need professional equipment at home to make great coffee. You don't even need really, really high priced equipment at home to make really great coffee. It's nice, it's maybe a little bit more helpful, a little bit easier, with some things. Maybe aesthetically, it's a little bit better. But no, you can make really great coffee with very minimal equipment. I mean, with a pot to heat water and a really cheap French press, you can make great coffee. I think to put it in general, more broad terms, understand your brewer, whatever it is, whatever you're going to make it in, and really number one, ask a lot of questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Anybody who makes you feel small or makes you feel dumb for asking questions, just don't ask them again. Ask somebody else. Because I will say, I feel like a lot of people that I've met in the coffee community are very nice people who love to answer questions. Yeah, there's a few that don't, but that's fine. Don't be afraid to ask questions. But whatever brewer you have, whatever thing you're going to use, get to know that thing and don't be afraid to try things. Like if you make coffee and it's bad, don't make it that way again. Switch it up, change things, and work to make it good. And once you do find obviously that recipe that's good, try to be as consistent as possible. A digital scale, number one thing that I tell people you should have, because like coffee, for the most part, to make good coffee to water ratio is going to be one of the most important things. And if you don't accurately weigh your coffee and your water, it's impossible to be consistent.
Sure.
And so that would, for sure, coffee to water ratio, and then probably grinding would be the next thing. But again, get to know your brewer and really understand what's going on.
Well, why don't we talk about a French press, since that's something that I think probably a lot of people have access to, and if they
Yeah.
don't, it's an affordable piece of equipment. Walk us through, some of the things to keep in mind, whether it's ratio, grind, water temperature, to make a great cup from a French press.
Yeah. Uh, I love French press with how easy it is, and I, and I will say too, gosh, jump on YouTube for anybody who's kind of like, yes, French press is so easy, but I don't love that kind of like heavy, sometimes silty end. You can get from the cup in there.
Mhm.
You can definitely get paper filters that are perfectly, even some like you can obviously like cut your own, but sometimes are even perfectly cut for the bottom of that French press that you can plunge along with it, and you get a much cleaner cup of coffee that way. But yeah, with French press, I'd say if you can get coffee above 200 degrees, if you put it on the stove and you let it boil, let it sit for at least like a couple minutes so that it comes down a little bit. So you definitely don't want to be right up to that range, but like 200 to 205 is probably like a great range for a French press. Obviously, too, depending on the coffee, darker roasts, you can go lower temperatures. Lighter roasts, you want to go at a higher temperature just to make sure that that extraction level is where you want it to be. And then grind for a French press. Obviously, you're going to be coarser than most. But again, with people ask me, oh, like what number on my grinder should I grind at? Dude, what grinder is it? How long have you had it? When's the last time you cleaned it? Like forget the numbers. It's like if you're grinding and your coffee grinds look like sea salt, you're probably in a great range. Kind of shoot for that sea salt look if you're going for French press, and then put your coffee in, put your water in. Water ratio 15 to 1. That's what I would start at for a French press. If it's too watery, for your liking, go down to say 12 to 1, 10 to 1, even for some people. If it's a little too strong, at 15 to 1, you can up the water, or it might possibly you ground it too fine. So you could kind of play with both of those. Usually 15, 16 to 1 is getting into the range of like that's you know 18 to 1. That would be like if you're looking for really delicate flavors and that's what you're tasting for, you can get that in 18 to 1, but it's going to be borderline. That's going to be kind of some people's max is going to be in that range before it starts to taste kind of much lighter than you're going to want. But yeah, I would say 15 to 1 to start. Make sure you weigh it, and then 4 minutes. 4 minutes, plunge it. Depending on some French presses now advertise like, hey, we've got this brew stop technology where you can push the plunger down and it separates the coffee from the water so that it doesn't keep extracting. So you can leave it in there so that it stays hot. I have seen brewers that actually do that fairly well. It's not perfect. So I typically suggest, hey, if you're going to drink it now, like just pour it out into a mug and drink it. But yeah, in general, I'd say that's the path to success with the French press.
Awesome. Love it. All right. What story are you telling with Namesake Coffee?
I love one of our taglines is drink intentionally, and that's something that my wife actually came up with. And I would say a lot of conversations just personally that my wife and I have together is this idea that life can be really hard at times. Life can kind of kick you in the teeth, and so I think for us, we man, like we're in our 30s, and at times like man, like life goes so fast and so much is happening, and I feel like I'm going to wake up tomorrow at 80 years old and it's all going to be over. And so yeah, and
Yeah.
so I think for us it's like, man, live every day uh, with intention, which sounds so cliche, but I think the story that Jess and I try to tell with Namesake, and not just with having great coffee. Like great coffee is a given. Like you can find great coffee in every city of America if you're willing to look fairly hard. And so for us, it's like, yeah, great coffee is a given. Customer service should be a given. And so what makes us different than other people? How do we try to set ourselves apart? It's like putting reflection questions on the back of our labels, like, hey, ask yourself these questions in the morning and see how you're doing. What are your hobbies? Do you have hobbies? If you don't, get some. Like, what are the things that you're doing outside of, like if work brings you a ton of value and like really fulfills your identity, wow, good for you. Like the rest of us are super jealous. If it, but if
Mhm.
it's just a job, like what are you doing outside of work to fulfill yourself and to make sure that like your life is fulfilling and you're doing fun things and you're doing interesting things. Like again, talking about different flavors, like one of our favorite things is not just getting to know local restaurant owners and eateries and coffee shops and cafes, but to like go to them frequently and eat their food and experience what they have to offer. And so yeah, I think for us it's being a part of a community that's creating craft things, good tasting things, interesting things, and just trying to be a little piece of that community that's just creating those types of experiences for people.
I record all of my interviews for Bean to Barstool in my upstairs office, so at this point in the conversation, I headed downstairs to my kitchen so that Michael could walk me through a tasting of one of his coffee origins. Decided to go with Rwanda Gisenyi Kowapak. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that correctly. We'll assume probably not. But it's a really lovely origin that had come in my most recent subscription mailing from Namesake. So I typically make coffee using either an AeroPress or a French press. They're just simple but consistent ways to make coffee on just like a normal weekday morning. Went with the French press this time. So while I was boiling my water and grinding my beans and all that, Michael was talking a little bit about how to clean a grinder and how important that actually is and all that kind of stuff. Once the water had actually boiled, though, we started talking about how to actually make coffee in a French press and then continued our conversation from there. Because I had taken my laptop downstairs to do this, you'll hear a change in my vocal audio because I'm not using my podcasting mic. I'm just using the standard laptop mic. But I hope you enjoy the rest of this conversation.
So yeah, I mean, if I was doing 18 or 20 grams, like I do, like for a single cup for me, I do typically like 20 grams to 320 water.
We're at 201 in the water, so I will pour that in and grab a
So I think that's
timer
a
here.
16 to 1.
And do you advise anything in terms of like blooming this or just pour it in the full amount?
I don't bloom it. Blooming, other than like if you want to bloom it and then smell it just for like the sensory experience, blooming typically is that you do that with Chemex V60 non-immersion brews to basically so that like after you bloom it, when you start to pour the water, you lessen the risk of channeling, dry pockets, all those things. Obviously with a French press, you pour it all in, you mix it up, like you're not worried about dry pockets because it's an immersion brew. And to it is good to mix it. Like I've heard some people say, like, oh yeah, like once you put the water in, like don't touch it. It's like no, like mix it up to make
Yeah,
sure
I
that
just did
there's
a little stir there. So I've got my timer going. While we're waiting for this to brew, what do you recommend for people in terms of water? I mean, distilled water, filtered water, does it matter that much?
Yeah, great question. It does matter for sure, but it only matters to the point of does it taste good to you? And that like if you drink your own water out of the tap and it tastes good to you or doesn't have any funky smells, you're probably okay. Now that is a vast generalization. If you want, you can get a TDS meter, which is total dissolved solids in your water. You can get a TDS meter off of Amazon, for really cheap. Not that I'm promoting Amazon, but like you can get one for pretty cheap. And just test your water TDS. I mean, anything under 200 is going to be pretty good. I think two to 300, you know, again, it's relative. Like, does it taste good to you? But so I would say tap water first because it's free if it works for you. After that, if you need some sort of water remediation, again, like I hate recommending bottled water just from the plastic part, but like you can use bottled water. Make sure that it's spring water, like there's actual mineral content in the water. You don't want distilled water because it won't brew. Like there's no without mineral content, there's nothing for the coffee to attach to and extract. So you'll just end up with really watery coffee all the time. So you don't want distilled water. You'll definitely want mineral water. Or if you're somebody who really wants to like go all in and like, oh, I'm really committed to this, you can buy distilled water. And then there's actually a company that started just down the street in Cedarville called Third Wave Water. Charles Nick, friend of mine, I've known him for a long time, so this is a shameless plug for him. And they've created Third Wave Water, which is these mineral packets that they make them for 1 gallon and then 5 gallon sizes, jugs of water. So you go to the store, buy a 1 gallon jug of distilled water, take one of their mineral packets, throw it in there, and it's like the perfect mineral content ratio for brewing coffee. If you have really poor quality tap water, that would be my first recommendation is like, hey, like even if you want to go like a 5 gallon jug, like buy a 5 gallon jug of water, put a mineral packet in there, and that'll last you a long time, so.
Tell me about this coffee then. So we're having the Rwanda. Tell me more about the origin and what we can expect from it.
Yeah, so that is one of the first Rwandan coffees that we've bought in a while. I think we bought some got years ago. But yeah, I bought that coffee really just because I was interested in a naturally processed Rwandan. I think that's the first naturally processed Rwandan I'd had that we had bought from, and got a sample of it, tasted it, just love. I I love African coffees, and I know sometimes I can be in the minority there because, again, this is a generalization, but African coffees typically are higher, have higher, acidity levels than a lot of Central and South America. Again, generalization, but in general, that's the case. And so when I tasted it, though, I felt like, oh, this will bridge a gap of people that like don't love Kenyan, don't love like really, really bright, acidic, kind of like grapefruit acidic almost taste that sometimes Kenyan coffee can have. Um, it actually reminded me, not necessarily in like the taste of it, but kind of the feeling of an Ethiopian, where like you do have the acidity, but it's a lot more muted than you would typically get. Because I've had some Rwandan coffees that remind me more of Kenya in their levels of acidity, but that one was like, oh, okay, I like this, and I'm pretty sure like the vast majority of other people will like it as well because it doesn't have that kind of kick you in the face acidity that some African coffees can have.
Yeah, as I'm tasting this, I mean, initially there's a fair amount of just kind of like mellow earthiness, and then you get kind of more of like a muted berry-like acidity, rather
Yep.
than that intensity that you were talking about from some others. You know this better than I do. I mean, when you're working with people on tasting coffee, there's this irreducible complexity to just like the abstract idea of what coffee tastes like. That is, when you first taste a coffee, 95% of it is just that coffee idea. And then you're
Yep.
just looking for those little accents around that. And I think, well, that's true of, to a degree, that's true of learning to taste anything. I feel like coffee is the one that people run into the most trouble of like, well, it says I'm supposed to taste this and I don't taste those things because there's just that like monolith of coffee that's sitting in the way to get to those.
Yeah, when I attempt to describe tasting coffee, tasting notes, feel like, oh, like why did you put that on there? It doesn't taste like that at all. I tell people like tasting notes, number one, are set by Q graders, which are essentially, the sommeliers of coffee, much better tasters than myself. But even in that, yeah, coffee, man, is so. And again, like this is the reason why I think myself, people like yourself, love it, is that it's so can be so abstract and diverse and trying to describe what you're tasting. And that's from person to person. Like you'll taste something and taste totally different things that I might taste
Mhm.
from like the exact same coffee brewed the exact same way. And so with tasting notes, yes, sometimes that might be a flavor that somebody tasted and put that on there. But even in that, I would say most Q graders of people who are really good at tasting coffee would tell you, hey, I didn't put that on there because I thought, oh, yeah, that tastes like brownie. No, when I tasted it, it kind of gave me the impression of that, or it reminded me of the brownie that I had yesterday. I was like, oh, yeah, like that kind of tastes like that. Not that it tastes exactly like it, but it kind of gives
Right.
you that remembrance of that. And then honestly, too, there's a lot of tasting notes that aren't even tastes at all. It will literally be a feeling or like an emotion that it
Yeah.
evoked in somebody, and they'll put that as
Yeah.
like a
Yeah. Yeah.
tasting note. And so I tell people, hey, like don't necessarily buy a coffee based on the tasting notes because you think, oh, that's what it's going to taste like. That's what it's going to taste like, and I'm going to like it because of that. It's it's somebody's best guess at the experience you might have.
You and I met many years ago now at Learn, Love, Eat that London from Peace on
Yes.
Fifth was leading. And I remember the talk that I gave at that was all about how our backgrounds, culturally, personally, influence our entire tasting vocabulary. And
Yes.
there is great opportunity with that. There's also has for a long time been a lot of problems with that because so much of the established vocabulary for basically every artist in food and drink, in this case coffee, has been so Eurocentric and so determined by a handful of white North Americans or Europeans. And if we can back away from that a little bit, there's great opportunity to bridge gaps and to learn about each other just through our tasting vocabulary, just through tasting the same thing together and saying, why do you taste that? I don't even know what that is. Tell me the story of why you know what that flavor is because I've never even heard of that fruit or I've never, whatever it is. And if we can just change our posture with that, because I think one thing that I see a lot, and this is happening across every artist in food and drink that I pay attention to, is a very positive desire to remove gatekeeping and to remove barrier of entry and to prevent people from feeling intimidated by not being able to taste these different things, which is great. I think sometimes the counter that we give to that though is to remove all tasting though, like to back away from it so far that it's just like I'm not going to even interact on the level of tasting notes because that would be snobbish. And it's like I honestly think the answer is the other direction of like we need to all change our posture and from a posture of more humility actually lean in to tasting vocabulary so that we can learn from each other and share those stories.
Yes. Yes, 100%. I think, and again, like there's I 100% realize, yes, somebody like me, somebody like you, like my wife that are really passionate about this, that just love tasting things. Yes, I think there's always going to be a certain level where like people can't hang. They just don't care enough to hang with us in that, and that's okay. But I 100% agree with you. Like, and again, this is what I do in my own home when I have friends, people over that are either tasting black coffee for the first time, or they're tasting black coffee for the first time with me, and they're saying, "Wow, like this is a totally different experience." Whether they and I tell people part of part of learning to taste different flavors, it's not necessarily always like it's not always going to be, I don't want to say enjoyable, but it's not like you're not always going to taste like, oh, that's my favorite. It's
Right.
like, no, like the goal is to taste flavors whether you like them or not. Like, yeah, there are certain flavors that you taste something and you're like, oh, if you want to spit that out, like it just tastes horrible, like that's one thing. But then there's a whole breadth of other things like, oh, well, like, yeah, like that's not my favorite, but that's really interesting. Like, ooh, yeah, like that reminds me of this flavor or this like smell or this experience that I had. And like, yeah, like I probably wouldn't choose that again, or that
Mhm.
wouldn't be like my go-to thing. But like, yeah, I taste that. And again, I think for namesake, what we try to do is bridge that gap where like if you're somebody who's super into artisan coffee and super into tasting and you want like kind of this very diverse experience, we're here for it and we love that and we try to provide that like with all of our like monthly and biweekly subscriptions. We have subscriber exclusive coffees that we only offer for subscriptions, and I will say too, like we even have other coffees that I specifically buy with just subscribers in mind because I know those are the people that we're going to focus in on and say, hey, yeah, like I would say most of our subscribers want different things. They want variety, they want diversity. And so, like, yes, we lean heavily into that and we want to provide that. And then we also want to say, hey, like, because even for some of our subscribers, like, hey, if you like our espresso blend and that's all you want, we'll send that to you. And like, we'll just like, give that to you until you can't drink any more of it. And that's fine. Like, that's great. And so we try to bridge that gap of like, hey, like if you find something you like and that's all that you want and you just like love Guatemalan coffee and it's like really chocolatey and just like that's what reminds you of like a traditional cup of coffee and that's what you love, great. I would love to send you some Papua New Guinea for you to try just to like mix it up and like kind of in a way like blow your mind of what how different coffee can be and how diverse it can be. But if you just like hate that and you don't want that, like that's fine. But like I try to encourage people, hey, like just try it. Like just taste it and just experience something new and kind of like I think you've had our Papua New Guinea coffee. I think I've sent it to you. And that is one of the coffees that I am just like we're actually almost out of it. But I think for the last year, that is my favorite coffee just because it's so dynamic and so kind of like in your face with all that's going on. And yeah, I just love it.
Yeah. I think it's hard for me and probably maybe for you, for a lot of people who work in and around food and beverage to remember that most people are just looking for a thing to consistently enjoy, whereas
Yes.
I'm always looking for experiences. And so when I'm
Yes.
leading like a beer tasting, I always preface at the beginning, it's okay if you don't like all of these. My hope is that you will enjoy the experience of tasting them with me. So even if one of these ends up being something that you wouldn't order again, approach it with curiosity and an open mind. And I hope you enjoy the experience of tasting it, even if you don't want it again. It can be fun to taste things that don't taste good. And I forget that that's somewhat unique to me and a fellow band of nerds like yourself who are just gonna always gonna want the new experience.
Yeah, and I will even say this too in my own, and this is probably more for the people who are passionate to kind of go down this road. If you're somebody who is in that vein, closer to you and I, man, I don't know how many times, especially in the last few years, that I've noticed I'll taste something and I'll say like, ooh, like that's not my favorite. Like I don't love that. And then, maybe a few months later, I'll taste something and like, oh, that kind of reminds me of this, but it's either less intense or it's not quite as much of that flavor that I didn't love, but it's like, oh, I like this. Like it kind of reminds me of this, but I actually like this because it's less of this and a little bit more of this. And like just for example, like I'm not a huge like heavy lemon flavored person. Like I just like I don't love lemon. Like someone who brings like lemon bars, I'm like, yeah, like maybe I'll try it, but like just not my favorite. But I've noticed, especially like again, like shameless plug for my friends at Grist. The last few times I've gone to Grist, I've gotten some very citrusy, lemony sauces that they've made, and I'm just like, dude, I love this. Like, and because and I say that because yeah, previous me might have said like, oh, like there's lemon in that. I don't want that because I don't like lemon. Well, like just because you don't like lemon bars doesn't mean you won't like some lemon in this, pasta sauce or in this, whatever this dessert. It's like maybe you don't like just lemon and really like in your face heavy lemon flavor, but that doesn't mean that like lemon is not a valuable flavor in a lot of different things.
Yeah, absolutely. We run into that on beer, specifically with hops. You get a lot of, hops tend to get a reaction people really like
Yep.
or don't like. Every beer any of those folks have ever tasted has hops in it. So trying to figure out what that means in terms of like, when you say you don't like hoppiness, I think you mean this. But yeah, in fact, this other beer you love would taste nothing like that without the hops. So like
Yep.
trying to figure out where that falls on there. Michael, I've kept you way too long. This has been a lot of fun. I would love to come down sometime and taste some coffee with you at the shop for sure.
Absolutely, yes. Next time in person, 100% for sure. I would love that.
I will definitely be making sure that in-person tasting with Michael and Jessica happens sometime soon. Michael mentioned the Ethiopian shikiso origin. That might sound familiar to Bean to Barstool followers. A little while back, I did an Instagram live coffee and craft chocolate pairing with my friend Shay Pal of Chalk Coffee Wine, and I used that origin again in the French press with a really great chocolate pairing. I actually ended up putting a small blog post up on the Bean to Barstool site about that if you want to check it out. Once again, Namesake Coffee is my favorite coffee roaster. I am so glad that they're here in the Dayton area, and I appreciate the thoughtful way that they approach both the roasting of their beans, but also the way that they present that coffee, the way that they do their branding and education. Just all around, really love what they're doing. You can find out more about Namesake on their website. I'll put that in the show notes. You can also sign up for a coffee subscription to get their excellent coffees sent directly to you. That's what I do. Again, I'll put a link to their information in the show notes. Thanks to Michael for coming on the show today and to all of you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Bean to Barstool.